Welcome to Mind's Labyrinth, a channel where the boundaries between reality and nightmare dissolve, and your deepest fears come to life. Tonight, we dive into a chilling tale that will haunt your thoughts long after the screen fades to black. This is not just a story, it's a real account. One that drags you into the abyss of a tormented mind. Imagine, if you will, standing on the precipice of sanity, peering into a void where nothing is certain, where the shadows play tricks on your eyes, and the whispers in the dark are not your imagination. This story begins with a seemingly routine investigation, a detective drawn to a remote, desolate bridge, known only as the Bridge of Lost Souls. For years, this bridge has been the focal point of countless disappearances, all shrouded in mystery and fear. Those who vanished were ordinary people, each last seen crossing that forsaken structure under the cover of night. They were never seen again. What makes this case even more disturbing is that each person, in their final moments, reported seeing something, a figure, a shadow, or perhaps something far worse. These visions were said to be so horrifying, so unimaginable, that they drove the victims to madness before they disappeared forever. Our story follows Detective Mark Thompson, a seasoned investigator known for his stoic demeanor and logical mind. But as he delves into this case, even his unwavering resolve begins to crack. He's heard the tales, the legends whispered among the locals, stories of a cursed bridge that traps the souls of those who cross it, feeding on their fears until there is nothing left but an empty shell. Mark dismisses these as superstitions, the ramblings of frightened minds. But as he gets closer to the truth, he starts to experience the same visions that plagued the missing. He sees them in his dreams, in the periphery of his vision, always just out of reach, like a distant memory trying to resurface. The more he investigates, the more the line between reality and delusion blurs. His nights are filled with terrifying nightmares of crossing the bridge, only to be met by a dark figure waiting on the other side, its face obscured, its presence suffocating. Mark wakes up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, but the fear lingers long after he opens his eyes. During the day, he hears voices, whispers calling his name, urging him to cross the bridge, to see what lies beyond. They promise answers, but they also promise an end, a final escape from the torment that has begun to consume him. This is a story of terror, not from the outside world, but from within. A descent into the madness that lurks in the deepest recesses of the mind. As you watch, you'll find yourself questioning everything. Is Mark really losing his sanity? Or is he uncovering a truth so dark, so incomprehensible, that it defies logic? Prepare yourself, because once you step onto the Bridge of Lost Souls, there is no turning back. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Mind's Labyrinth for more stories that will challenge your grip on reality, and share it with those brave enough to face the horrors that lie within. Now let us cross the bridge together and see what awaits in the shadows. The tale of the Bridge of Lost Souls unfolds in a setting that seems to exist in a realm between reality and nightmare. A place where the air itself is heavy with unspoken fears and lingering dread. Imagine a bridge, old, forgotten by time, and shrouded in a perpetual mist that clings to the ground like a ghostly veil. This bridge, stretching across a deep, murky river, is the only remnant of a long abandoned road, leading to nowhere. It stands alone, isolated in a landscape that offers no solace, only the echo of your own footsteps and the relentless whisper of the wind. The bridge itself is a structure of eerie beauty, its stone arches worn and cracked, covered in a thick layer of moss that gives it an almost organic appearance, as if it has become part of the earth itself. The iron railings, once sturdy, are now rusted and jagged, twisted into grotesque shapes that resemble grasping hands or leering faces when seen from the corner of your eye. And then there are the carvings, ancient symbols etched into the stone, their meanings lost to time. Yet they seem to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they are alive, waiting for the right moment to unleash their curse. Beneath the bridge, the river flows dark and silent, its waters so still they seem almost unnatural. It is said that those who stare into its depths too long will see more than just their reflection. They will see the faces of the lost, the souls who were claimed by the bridge, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths open in a silent scream. The river's surface is often covered in a thin layer of fog, obscuring what lies beneath. But every so often, the fog parts, revealing glimpses of things that should not be, shapes that twist and writhe just beneath the surface, shadows that do not belong to anything of this world. Surrounding the bridge is a dense forest, its trees tall and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, blocking out the light and creating an oppressive atmosphere that presses down on anyone who dares to enter. The forest floor is covered in a thick carpet of dead leaves which crunch underfoot with a sound that seems unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. The air is cold, unnervingly still, and carries the faint scent of decay, as if something has been rotting here for far too long. It is within this unsettling environment that Detective Mark Thompson begins his investigation. As he steps onto the bridge for the first time, he is struck by an overwhelming sense of unease, a feeling that something is watching him, waiting for him to take another step forward. The bridge, with its eerie silence and oppressive atmosphere, seems to breathe with a life of its own. Its stone and iron, pulsating with a dark energy that seeps into Mark's mind, planting seeds of doubt and fear. Every footstep he takes echoes unnervingly, as if the bridge is amplifying the sound, mocking him with each hesitant step. The bridge is more than just a structure. It is a place of power, a nexus of fear and despair where the boundaries between the living and the dead, between the sane and the insane, are blurred beyond recognition. The further Mark ventures, the more he feels the weight of countless souls pressing down on him, whispering in his ear, tugging at his thoughts, trying to pull him into the darkness. The once rational detective begins to question everything, his senses, his memories, even his very identity, as the bridge tightens its grip on his mind. The townspeople refuse to come near the bridge, their fear palpable in their eyes whenever its name is mentioned. They speak in hushed tones about the cursed place, their voices trembling as they recall the stories passed down through generations. Some say that the bridge was built over sacred ground, a place where ancient rituals were performed to appease dark entities that still hunger for souls. Others whisper that the bridge is a gateway, a threshold between this world and another, one where nightmares are real and escape is impossible. Mark Thompson, a man who once prided himself on his logical mind and unshakable resolve, now finds himself standing at the edge of reason, staring into the abyss. The setting is not just a backdrop for his investigation. It is a living, breathing entity that seeks to consume him, to drag him down into the same darkness that claimed so many before him. The bridge, the forest, the river, they are all part of a labyrinth, a twisted maze where every turn leads deeper into madness, and every step brings Mark closer to the truth that waits in the shadows. But as he stands on the bridge, feeling the cold wind whip through the iron railings and the damp air cling to his skin, Mark knows that the truth, whatever it may be, is something far worse than he ever imagined. The setting around him whispers this truth in every rustle of leaves, every creak of the ancient stone, and every shadow that flickers at the edge of his vision. A truth that he is not yet ready to face, but that he cannot escape. As Detective Mark Thompson delves deeper into his investigation of the Bridge of Lost Souls, the first signs that something is horribly wrong begin to manifest. Not with a dramatic flourish, but with subtle, creeping unease that gnaws at the edges of his sanity. It starts with the voices, soft, indistinct whispers that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. At first, Mark dismisses them as tricks of the wind, the mind playing games in the silence of the desolate landscape. But these whispers are different. They call his name, faintly at first, almost like a distant echo. Mark, Mark. The sound is barely audible, just a breath in the wind, but it chills him to the bone. As the days pass, these whispers grow louder, more insistent. They follow him wherever he goes, whether he's standing on the bridge, walking through the town, or even lying in bed at night. The voices are relentless, their tone shifting from a pleading murmur to an accusing hiss. Why are you here? What do you want? Leave while you still can. Each time he hears them, Mark feels a cold shiver run down his spine, as if icy fingers are tracing the length of his back. The voices are not just sounds, they carry with them a sense of foreboding, palpable dread that makes his skin crawl. But it's not just the voices. Mark begins to notice things that shouldn't be there. Fleeting shadows that dart just out of sight, reflections in windows that don't match his own movements, and objects in his peripheral vision that vanish when he turns to look at them. It starts small, a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye, a shadow that seems to linger a moment too long, but soon these strange occurrences become impossible to ignore. One night, as he's reviewing his notes, he sees a figure standing behind him in the reflection of the window. He spins around, heart pounding, only to find nothing there. But the figure, tall, dark, and featureless, remains etched in his mind, a ghostly imprint that refuses to fade. Mark tries to rationalize these experiences, telling himself that he's overworked, that the stress of the investigation is getting to him. But the rational explanations begin to crumble when the strange occurrences start to intensify. His dreams become plagued with vivid, horrifying nightmares, each one more terrifying than the last. In these dreams, he's always on the bridge, but it's different, more sinister. The mist is thicker, the shadows deeper, and he's never alone. Dark, distorted figures surround him, their faces twisted in expressions of agony and rage. They reach out for him, their hands cold and clammy, their voices a cacophony of despair and fury. He wakes up drenched in sweat, his heart racing, but the terror lingers long after he's awake, blurring the line between his dreams and reality. Then there are the memories, fragments of events that don't align with what he knows to be true. Mark begins to remember things that never happened, or did they? He recalls walking across the bridge in the dead of night, feeling the oppressive weight of unseen eyes watching him, the sound of footsteps echoing behind him, getting closer and closer until they stop suddenly, as if the presence is right behind him. But when he turns around, there's nothing there, only the darkness and the oppressive silence. These memories are so vivid, so real, that he starts to doubt his own mind. Did these events actually happen, or are they just figments of his imagination, planted by whatever malevolent force inhabits the bridge? The most disturbing occurrence happens one evening as Mark is reviewing the case files in his dimly lit office. The room is quiet, save for the soft hum of the desk lamp and the rustle of paper. But then the atmosphere shifts. There's a sudden drop in temperature, and the air becomes thick with a sense of impending doom. Mark feels it before he sees it. A presence, dark and oppressive, filling the room with a suffocating tension. He looks up and sees, on the opposite wall, his shadow cast by the lamp. But something is wrong. His shadow is moving, shifting, even though he's sitting perfectly still. It seems to twitch, then slowly, deliberately, it starts to reach out toward him. The arm elongating unnaturally, the fingers stretching like claws. Mark freezes, his breath caught in his throat as he watches in horror. The shadow's arm reaches out across the wall, growing longer until it nearly touches him. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the shadow snaps back to its original position, as if nothing had happened. Mark blinks, his heart hammering in his chest, his mind racing to make sense of what he just saw. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? But deep down, he knows the truth. Something is playing with him, something that enjoys watching him squirm, something that feeds on his fear. These strange occurrences are not just mere coincidences. They are the first steps in a sinister game, where the stakes are Mark's sanity and perhaps even his soul. The bridge, the voices, the shadows, they are all pieces of a puzzle that is slowly coming together, a puzzle that, when completed, will reveal a truth too horrifying to comprehend. Mark is no longer just an investigator. He is a pawn in a game of terror, a game that is only just beginning. As Detective Mark Thompson's investigation deepens, The line between reality and nightmare continues to blur, leaving him in a state of perpetual dread. The strange occurrences that began as subtle, unsettling anomalies now invade every corner of his life, eroding his once steadfast mind. Mark's sense of reality becomes a fragile construct, teetering on the edge of collapse. The weight of this unseen force begins to unravel him from within, pulling him into a spiraling abyss of doubt, fear, and paranoia. Mark was once a man of logic, a detective who believed in evidence and facts, in the tangible and the real. But now, as the voices grow louder and the shadows more menacing, he finds himself questioning everything he once held as truth. Each day brings a new terror, a new crack in the foundation of his sanity. The once familiar world around him now feels alien, hostile, a place where nothing can be trusted, not even his own mind. He begins to doubt his memories, unsure of what is real and what is a fabrication of his increasingly tormented psyche. He remembers conversations with people who claim they never happened, sees faces in crowds that vanish when he tries to focus on them, and recalls events that seem to have occurred in a parallel world, one where the laws of reality are twisted and distorted. These memories feel as real as anything he has ever known, but when he tries to piece them together, they dissolve like smoke, leaving him grasping at nothing. The distrust extends beyond his own mind. Mark starts to see deception in the eyes of those around him, his colleagues, the townspeople, even his few remaining friends. They look at him with concern, but in their eyes, he sees something darker, something sinister. Are they hiding something from him? Are they part of the malevolent force that seems to be tightening its grip on him? He can't be sure anymore. Every interaction feels like a charade, every word a potential lie. The paranoia is suffocating, turning even the simplest exchanges into a complex web of suspicion and fear. Mark's internal monologue becomes a battlefield where reason and madness wage a relentless war. One part of him, the rational detective, insists that there must be a logical explanation for everything he's experiencing. Maybe it's stress, exhaustion, or a mental breakdown caused by the pressure of the case. But the other part of him, the part that hears the whispers, sees the shadows, and feels the cold, creeping dread, knows that something far more terrifying is at play. This part of him whispers that the bridge is not just cursed, but alive, sentient, feeding on his fear, his confusion, his very soul. This internal conflict intensifies when Mark starts receiving cryptic messages, notes left on his car windshield, emails with no sender, phone calls where the only sound is that of his own breathing. These messages are vague yet threatening, filled with warnings to stop his investigation, to leave town before it's too late. "You're not welcome here," one note reads, scrawled in a shaky, uneven hand. "Turn back before you cross the point of no return," says another. The letters smeared as if written in haste or fear. Mark's first instinct is to dismiss these as pranks, attempts to scare him off the case. But then he begins to notice the handwriting. It's his own. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. Has he been writing these notes to himself? If so, why? Is it a desperate attempt by his subconscious to protect him from the horrors he's unearthing? Or is it something darker, something outside of himself that is using his own mind against him? The fear of losing control, of being manipulated by an unseen force, grips him with a cold, unrelenting terror. He starts to avoid mirrors, afraid of what he might see staring back at him. An image of himself, but not quite right, as if something else is looking through his eyes. Something malevolent and hungry. As Mark's distrust grows, so does his isolation. He begins to push away those who care about him, convinced that they are somehow involved in the dark events surrounding the bridge. He avoids contact, locks himself away, obsessing over the case, trying to find answers in the increasingly fragmented and contradictory evidence. But the more he digs, the more the evidence seems to change, shifting like sand under his feet, leaving him with nothing solid to hold on to. The files he swore were on his desk disappear, only to reappear in places he's sure he never put them. Photographs show things that weren't there before. Dark smudges, shadowy figures in the background, eyes that seem to follow him. Sleep becomes a luxury he can no longer afford. Every time he closes his eyes, the nightmares return, more vivid and terrifying than before. In these dreams, he's always crossing the bridge, but something is waiting for him on the other side, something he can't see, but can feel. It's watching him, stalking him, waiting for the moment when he will finally give in to the madness and step off the edge into the abyss. He wakes up screaming, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, the terror lingering long after the dream has ended. Mark knows he is losing his grip on reality, but he can't stop. The bridge has become an obsession, a puzzle he must solve, even if it costs him his sanity. He can feel it drawing him in, deeper and deeper, into a place where the rules of reality no longer apply, where time and space twist and coil like a serpent, and where the truth, if it can even be called that, is something far darker than he ever imagined. The more he tries to resist, the stronger the pull becomes, until he's not sure if he's investigating the bridge or if the bridge is investigating him. The conflict within Mark reaches a fever pitch when he begins to hear his own voice among the whispers. A voice that sounds like his, but isn't. It taunts him, mocks him, tells him that he's already lost, that the bridge has claimed him, and there's no escape. "You're one of us now," it says, the words slithering into his mind like venom. "Come, cross the bridge. We're waiting for you." Mark tries to block it out, but the voice persists, growing louder, more insistent, until it's all he can hear, drowning out everything else. In his darkest moments, Mark begins to wonder if the voice is right. Maybe he's already lost. Maybe he's been lost from the moment he set foot on that cursed bridge. The distrust, the fear, the doubt, it's all consuming him, piece by piece. And soon there will be nothing left of the man he once was. Just another lost soul, claimed by the bridge, forever trapped in the labyrinth of his own mind. As Detective Mark Thompson's descent into madness deepens, the day finally arrives when he can no longer avoid the inevitable. He must confront the source of his terror. The whispers have grown louder, more urgent, pushing him toward the bridge that has haunted his every waking moment and tortured his dreams. It's as if the bridge itself is calling to him, beckoning him to step into the darkness that lies beyond. Mark knows that this confrontation is unavoidable, that the only way to end the nightmare is to face whatever lurks in the shadows of the Bridge of Lost Souls. The night is dark and heavy with fog as Mark makes his way to the bridge. The town is silent, its streets deserted, as if the very air is holding its breath, waiting for what is to come. Each step he takes feels like a journey deeper into an abyss from which there is no return. The fog wraps around him, thick and oppressive, muffling the sound of his footsteps and making the world around him seem distant and unreal. The trees on either side of the path loom like specters, their twisted branches reaching out as if trying to pull him back, to stop him from reaching the bridge. But Mark presses on, driven by a combination of dread and determination, knowing that he must see this through, no matter the cost. As he approaches the bridge, the fog parts slightly, revealing the dark, imposing structure that has become the epicenter of his fear. The bridge seems to pulse with a life of its own, the ancient stones almost breathing as they emit a faint, otherworldly glow. The carvings on the stone arches, their meanings long forgotten, seem to shift and writhe as Mark draws closer, as if they are reacting to his presence. The symbols, once merely strange and unsettling, now appear to be alive, filled with a malevolent energy that seeps into Mark's mind, whispering dark secrets and ancient curses. Mark hesitates at the foot of the bridge, his heart pounding in his chest. Every instinct screams at him to turn back, to run as far away as possible. But he knows that there is no escaping what lies ahead. With a deep breath, he steps onto the bridge, the sound of his footfall echoing unnaturally in the dense fog. The air grows colder with each step, the mist swirling around him like the grasping hands of the damned. The river below, once merely still and dark, now seems to churn with an unnatural fury, the water bubbling and hissing as if something monstrous is stirring beneath the surface. Halfway across the bridge, Mark feels it, a presence ancient and malevolent watching him from the shadows. He can't see it, but he knows it's there, just out of sight, waiting. The whispers that have tormented him for so long grow louder, becoming a cacophony of voices. Some pleading, others mocking, but all filled with a sense of overwhelming despair. "You shouldn't have come here," they say, their voices mingling into a single dreadful chorus. "Turn back now, before it's too late." But it's already too late. Mark knows that there is no turning back, that he must confront whatever awaits him. His breath comes in ragged gasps as he forces himself to move forward, every step feeling like he's dragging himself through thick, invisible mud. The shadows on the bridge shift and twist, forming grotesque shapes that seem to reach out toward him, their forms flickering like flame in the corner of his vision. He can feel their cold fingers brushing against his skin, a sensation that sends a shiver down his spine and fills him with a deep, primal fear. Then he sees it, a figure standing at the far end of the bridge, just beyond the reach of the faint light. It's tall, unnaturally so, its body draped in what appears to be shadows, shifting and swirling around it like living darkness. The figure has no discernible features, no face, only a void where a face should be. A darkness so deep it seems to swallow the light around it. But Mark can feel its eyes on him, piercing through the veil of shadow, locking onto him with an intensity that makes his blood run cold. The figure doesn't move, but Mark can sense its intent, a malevolent hunger, a desire to consume, to drag him into the same abyss that has claimed so many before him. The whispers reach a fever pitch, the voices screaming in his mind. "It's here. It's here. Run, Mark, run." But he's rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a fear so intense, it feels like his heart might stop at any moment. The figure begins to move, slowly, deliberately, each step sending a wave of cold terror through Mark's body. As it approaches, the shadows around it seem to grow, swallowing the light, the bridge, and even the fog, until there is nothing left but darkness. Mark's mind races, 1,000 thoughts, colliding in a storm of panic and dread. He tries to reach for his gun, but his hands won't obey him. They're numb, as if the cold has seeped into his very bones. The figure is close now, close enough that Mark can feel its icy breath on his face, the void where its eyes should be boring into his soul. In a final, desperate attempt to break free from the paralyzing fear, Mark forces himself to speak, his voice trembling but defiant. "What do you want from me?" he demands, though the words come out as little more than a whisper. The figure stops, its form towering over him, and for a moment, the whispers fall silent. The void where its face should be seems to shift, and Mark feels a cold hand grip his heart, squeezing until he can barely breathe. Then the figure speaks, not with words, but with a thought, a single overwhelming command that echoes through Mark's mind with the force of 1,000 voices. "Join us." The words are filled with a hunger, a desperation that sends waves of fear crashing over Mark. He can feel his will slipping away, the darkness creeping into his mind, filling every corner with its icy tendrils. The figure's command isn't just a request, it's a demand, a pull that he can't resist, dragging him closer to the edge of the abyss. Mark's vision begins to blur, the darkness consuming everything, until all he can see is the figure, its void-like face drawing him in, pulling him down into the depths of madness. He knows with a certainty that terrifies him that if he gives in, if he allows the darkness to take him, he will be lost forever. Another soul claimed by the bridge, another victim of its insatiable hunger. In a final act of defiance, Mark summons every ounce of strength he has left and takes a step back, breaking the figure's hold on him. The shadows around him ripple, the figure recoiling slightly, as if surprised by his resistance. Mark seizes the moment, turning and running back across the bridge, his feet pounding against the stone, the whispers screaming in his ears, urging him to flee. The darkness behind him surges, reaching out with long, shadowy tendrils, but Mark doesn't look back. He can feel the cold breath of the figure on his neck, the pull of the abyss still strong, but he pushes forward, driven by a primal need to survive. He reaches the other side of the bridge just as the first light of dawn breaks through the fog, the darkness retreating in the face of the rising sun. Mark collapses to the ground, gasping for breath, his body shaking with exhaustion and terror. The whispers fade, the shadows retreating into the depths of the bridge, and for the first time in what feels like an eternity, there is silence. But the silence is not comforting. It's the silence of something waiting, something that is not finished with him yet. Mark knows that this confrontation is far from over, that the bridge and the figure will not let him go so easily. As he lies there, the cold of the stone seeping into his bones, he realizes that the darkness has left its mark on him, that a part of him is still out there, on that bridge, lost in the shadows. And he knows, with a chilling certainty, that it will come for him again. The night of Mark Thompson's confrontation on the Bridge of Lost Souls marks a turning point, a moment where the lines between reality and the supernatural are irrevocably crossed. After his harrowing escape, Mark knows deep down that the bridge isn't just a place. It's a doorway, a passage to something far darker than he ever imagined. But what he doesn't yet realize is that the real terror is not just the bridge itself, but the truth that lies hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. In the days following his encounter, Mark's world unravels at an accelerating pace. Sleep becomes a distant memory, and even the brief moments of rest he manages are filled with nightmarish visions that claw at his sanity. The figure from the bridge, with its void-like face, haunts every corner of his mind, appearing in reflections, in the flicker of shadows, in the peripheral edges of his vision. It's always there, watching, waiting for him to break. The voices return, but they are different now, no longer whispers, but a chorus of insistent demands. "You must finish it," they say, their tone now cold and authoritative, as if they are no longer trying to persuade him but commanding him. Mark feels the pressure building, the overwhelming sense that something catastrophic will happen if he doesn't confront the truth. But what truth? The more he searches for answers, the more questions arise, like a tangled web of deceit and fear. Desperate for some semblance of control, Mark returns to the case files, hoping to find something he missed, something that will explain the terrifying events. As he pores over the documents, he finds a hidden folder, one that he swears wasn't there before. Inside are photos, black and white, grainy images that seem impossibly old. They show the bridge in various states of decay, but what catches Mark's eye is the series of photos that show people, dozens of them, standing on the bridge, their faces blurred as if they are caught in mid-motion, each one looking directly at the camera with an expression of absolute terror. Among them, Mark sees a face that stops his heart, a face he knows all too well. It's his own. The photo is unmistakable, showing him standing on the bridge, surrounded by others who look just as frightened. But how? When was this taken? He has no memory of it, yet there it is, undeniable and horrifying. His mind reels, trying to make sense of the impossible. Is this another trick, another assault on his already crumbling sanity? Or is it something far worse? The revelation hits him like a tidal wave. He's been here before, many times, in different lives, different realities. The bridge isn't just a place of horror, it's a cycle, a repeating loop where souls are drawn back again and again, each time trying to escape, each time failing. The figure he saw on the bridge, the one with the void-like face, isn't just a malevolent entity, it's him. Or rather, it's what he will become if he doesn't break the cycle. The terror of this realization is overwhelming. Mark is not just a victim of the bridge. He is part of it, trapped in a never-ending loop of fear and madness. The figure with no face is the final form of those who fail to escape, their identities erased, their souls consumed by the darkness. And the bridge is the prison, the gatekeeper of this eternal torment. Mark's mind races as he tries to find a way out, to break the cycle. But the more he thinks, the more he feels the darkness closing in, the void waiting to claim him. The faces in the photos, blurred and distorted, are his companions in this nightmare, each one a reminder of those who came before him, who failed to escape. They are all part of the same cycle, the same endless torment. In his desperation, Mark returns to the bridge, this time determined to end it once and for all. The night is cold, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The fog is heavier than ever, almost suffocating, as it clings to his skin like a cold, wet shroud. The bridge looms ahead, dark and foreboding, but this time it feels different, more alive, more aware of his presence. As Mark steps onto the bridge, he feels the pull of the void stronger than ever, the darkness reaching out for him, whispering promises of an end to his suffering, if only he will surrender. But Mark knows what awaits him if he gives in, an eternity as the faceless figure, lost in the shadows, consumed by the darkness. The climax of the story reaches its peak as Mark confronts the truth of the bridge, the truth of his own existence. The bridge is not just a physical place, it's a manifestation of fear, of despair, of the souls that have been trapped here for centuries. And the only way to escape is to break the cycle, to face the darkness and reject it, to hold on to his identity, his sanity, even as the void tries to tear it away. With a final surge of willpower, Mark steps forward, facing the figure that has haunted him, the faceless entity that is both him and not him. The darkness presses in, the void opening wide to swallow him whole. But Mark holds on, refusing to let go of who he is. The figure reaches out, its shadowy hand almost touching him, but Mark doesn't flinch. He stares into the void, into the abyss, and sees it for what it truly is, a reflection of fear, a manifestation of the terror that has kept him and so many others trapped for so long. In that moment, Mark understands the true nature of the bridge. It's a test, a trial of the soul, where only those who can confront and overcome their deepest fears can break free. The void isn't real, it's a construct of the mind, a shadow that feeds on fear but has no power over those who refuse to be afraid. With this realization, Mark takes a step forward, not away from the figure, but toward it, embracing the darkness rather than running from it. The void shudders, recoiling as if in pain, the shadows shrinking back as Mark's resolve strengthens. The figure begins to dissolve, its form breaking apart into wisps of shadow, and for the first time, Mark sees a face beneath the darkness, his own, twisted in fear, but now filled with a strange sense of peace. The darkness breaks, the void collapsing in on itself, and the bridge, once a place of terror, begins to crumble. The fog lifts, the cold dissipates, and the night sky is filled with stars, bright and beautiful, shining down on Mark as he stands on the remnants of the bridge. He has broken the cycle, freed himself from the endless loop of fear and despair. But as the bridge crumbles beneath his feet, Mark knows that this is not the end, but a new beginning. The souls that were trapped here are free now, released from their torment, and the bridge, no longer a place of horror, fades into nothingness. Mark steps back into the world, a world that now feels more real, more vibrant than it ever has before. The revelation is bittersweet. Mark has escaped, but the memories of what he has seen, of what he has experienced, will stay with him forever. He has faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but he knows that the battle has left its mark. The bridge may be gone, but the shadows will always linger, a reminder of the terror that almost claimed him. As he walks away, the night silent and peaceful around him, Mark feels a sense of closure, but also a sense of loss. The terror is over, but the journey has changed him, left him with scars that may never fully heal. He has faced the unknown and survived, but at a cost. One that he will carry with him for the rest of his days. After confronting the unimaginable terror of the Bridge of Lost Souls, Detective Mark Thompson emerges victorious, but not unscathed. The battle he fought was not just against an external force, but against the deepest recesses of his own mind, a confrontation that has left him forever changed. As he steps away from the crumbling remains of the bridge, the night feels eerily still, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. But for Mark, there is no return to normalcy, no escape from the consequences of what he has endured. The days that follow are a blur, filled with an oppressive silence that weighs heavily on Mark's soul. The bridge may be gone, but its shadow lingers, an invisible presence that haunts his every waking moment. The world around him feels different, distant, as if he is seeing it through a veil, a barrier that separates him from the life he once knew. He finds no comfort in familiar places or faces. Everything is tainted by the memory of the bridge, the darkness that almost consumed him. Mark tries to return to his routine, to lose himself in his work, but nothing feels the same. His once sharp mind, known for its keen attention to detail, now falters. He loses track of time, finds himself staring blankly at his desk, unable to focus. His hands tremble when he holds a pen, and the simple act of writing a report becomes an insurmountable task. The voices that once tormented him have fallen silent, but their absence is almost worse, leaving a void that is filled with the echoes of his own thoughts. Thoughts that circle back to the bridge, to the darkness, to the figure with the void-like face. Sleep offers no respite. Every night Mark is plagued by vivid nightmares, reliving the horrors of the bridge in agonizing detail. He sees the faces of the lost, their expressions frozen in terror, their eyes pleading for release. He feels the cold breath of the void on his skin, the pull of the darkness as it tries to drag him back. He wakes up screaming, drenched in sweat, the shadows of his dreams lingering long after he opens his eyes. The nightmares are relentless, each one more terrifying than the last, each one blurring the line between dream and reality until Mark is no longer sure where one ends and the other begins. The bridge has left its mark on him, a scar that no one else can see but that he feels with every beat of his heart. He starts to notice things, small, almost imperceptible changes in the world around him. The shadows in his apartment seem to move when he isn't looking, stretching and twisting in ways that defy logic. He catches glimpses of figures out of the corner of his eye, dark shapes that vanish the moment he turns to face them. The once comforting silence of his home now feels oppressive, filled with an unseen presence that watches him, waiting for him to let his guard down. Mark becomes paranoid, his every thought consumed by the fear that the darkness is not truly gone, that it is waiting for the right moment to strike. He checks his locks multiple times before bed, leaves lights on in every room, and keeps a weapon within arm's reach at all times. But deep down, he knows that these precautions are futile, that the real threat is not something he can fight with a gun or a lock. The real threat is inside him, a part of him now, a darkness that he cannot escape. The people around Mark notice the change in him, the way his once confident demeanor has been replaced by a constant undercurrent of fear and anxiety. His colleagues whisper behind his back, speculating about what really happened on that bridge. But Mark doesn't care. He has no interest in their pity or their curiosity. All that matters to him is finding a way to live with the knowledge of what he has seen, of what he has become. The consequences of his encounter with the bridge extend beyond his own mind. Strange things start to happen around him. Things that defy explanation. Objects move on their own, lights flicker and go out without reason, and the air grows cold and thick with a sense of dread whenever he enters a room. It's as if the bridge has left a piece of itself with him, a dark influence that spreads like a virus, infecting everything it touches. Mark tries to distance himself from others, fearing that whatever darkness clings to him will spread to them. But it's too late. He sees the fear in their eyes, the way they recoil from him, as if they can sense the malevolent presence that follows him everywhere he goes. His friends stop calling, his colleagues keep their distance, and soon, Mark finds himself completely alone, isolated in a world that no longer feels real. As the days turn into weeks, Mark begins to wonder if the bridge truly did crumble, or if it simply moved inside him, taking root in his soul. He feels its pull every day, a constant nagging sensation at the back of his mind, urging him to return, to cross over into the darkness once more. The temptation is strong, and with each passing day, it grows harder to resist. The darkness promises an end to the nightmares, an end to the fear. But Mark knows that to give in would mean losing himself forever. In the final act of this haunting tale, Mark stands at the edge of a precipice, both literally and figuratively. He finds himself drawn back to the site where the bridge once stood, now nothing more than a barren, desolate landscape. The air is thick with fog, just as it was that fateful night, and the silence is deafening. As he looks out over the void, where the bridge used to be, he feels the pull of the darkness, stronger than ever, calling to him, beckoning him to step forward, to let go. But Mark refuses to give in. With every ounce of strength he has left, he turns his back on the void, on the darkness, and walks away. He knows that the road ahead will not be easy, that the darkness will always be a part of him, but he is determined to fight it, to live his life in spite of it. He may never be free of the bridge's influence, but he will not let it consume him. As he walks away from the site, the fog begins to lift, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Mark feels a glimmer of hope, a small but powerful reminder that even in the darkest of places, there is always a way out. The bridge may have taken something from him, but it did not take everything. He is still here, still fighting, and that is enough. The story ends with Mark stepping into the light, leaving the darkness behind, but with the knowledge that it will always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness. The terror is not over, but Mark has found the strength to face it, to live with it, and to keep moving forward. The final image is one of both hope and fear, a man walking away from the site of his greatest horror, determined to reclaim his life, but forever marked by the darkness that tried to claim him. The days pass slowly after Mark Thompson's escape from the Bridge of Lost Souls. But the weight of what he experienced lingers, a shadow that refuses to fade. He has returned to his life, but nothing feels the same. The world around him, once familiar and solid, now seems fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment, revealing the darkness beneath. In the quiet moments, when the noise of the day fades and the night creeps in, Mark feels the presence of the bridge like a cold breath on the back of his neck, a reminder that the terror is never truly gone. Mark tries to rebuild his life, to find some semblance of normalcy, but the memories of the bridge haunt him. He can't escape the images that play on a loop in his mind. The faces of the lost, the void-like figure, the darkness that almost consumed him. These memories are not just fragments of a nightmare. They are a part of him now, stitched into the very fabric of his being. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the corner of his eye sends a jolt of fear through him, a fear that he can never fully shake. As the weeks turn into months, Mark begins to notice subtle changes in himself. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in his thoughts, his emotions, his very perception of reality. He becomes more withdrawn, more distant, as if a part of him is still trapped on that bridge, unable to move on. His once sharp mind now feels clouded, his thoughts often drifting back to the bridge, to the darkness that lurks just out of sight. He finds himself questioning everything, his memories, his sanity, even the reality of the world around him. Is the darkness still out there, waiting for him to let his guard down? Or has it taken root inside him, growing stronger with each passing day? Mark's reflection in the mirror becomes a stranger's face, haunted and hollow, eyes sunken with the weight of sleepless nights and the constant gnawing dread that something is wrong, something he can't quite put his finger on. The man who once prided himself on his logical mind, his ability to see through the darkest mysteries, now feels adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The bridge may be gone, but its influence remains, a dark seed planted deep within his psyche, waiting to sprout. One night, Mark dreams of the bridge again. In the dream, he stands at the edge of the void, looking down into the abyss. The fog is thick, curling around his legs like a living thing, and the air is heavy with the stench of decay. The bridge stretches out before him, whole and intact, as if it was never destroyed. And there, at the far end, stands the figure, tall, featureless, its void-like face turned toward him. It doesn't move, but Mark can feel its gaze, feel the cold grip of its presence as it beckons him forward. He knows that if he takes a single step, he will be lost forever. But the pull is irresistible, a deep, primal urge to step into the darkness and let it swallow him whole. Mark wakes with a start, his heart pounding, the sheets tangled around his legs like the fog in his dream. The room is dark, the shadows deep and unmoving, but he can still feel the cold, still hear the faint whispers that echoed in his dream. It takes him a moment to realize he's awake, that the bridge is not real, not here. But the fear remains, clawing at his chest, making it hard to breathe. He turns on the light, needing to banish the darkness. But even in the warm glow of the lamp, the shadows seem to shift, to stretch toward him, as if they have a life of their own. The next morning, Mark tries to shake off the lingering unease, but it clings to him. A constant reminder that the darkness is never far away. He goes through the motions of his day, but his thoughts are clouded, his mind drifting back to the dream, to the bridge. The world around him feels distant, muted, as if he's seeing it through a veil. Colors seem less vibrant, sounds muffled, and there's a sense of detachment that makes everything feel unreal. Mark knows that this is the bridge's final curse, a slow, insidious erosion of his reality, a pull toward the darkness that he can never fully escape. As the days go on, Mark begins to notice new signs, subtle but unmistakable, that the darkness is still with him. His reflection in the mirror sometimes seems to move on its own, the eyes staring back at him with a cold, empty gaze that isn't his own. Objects in his apartment are not where he left them, small things like keys or a pen, but it's enough to make him question his own memory, his own sanity. He hears faint whispers in the night, voices that call his name, beckoning him back to the bridge, back to the void. Mark tries to resist, to hold on to the remnants of his life, but the darkness is relentless, wearing him down with each passing day. The reflection in the mirror becomes more distorted, more unfamiliar, until he can no longer recognize the person staring back at him. The whispers grow louder, more insistent, filling his mind with doubts and fears that he can't shake. He starts to see the figure from the bridge in his dreams, in the shadows of his apartment, in the faces of strangers on the street. It's always there, just out of reach, waiting for the moment when he will finally give in. The final straw comes one night when Mark is sitting alone in his apartment, trying to focus on the television, trying to drown out the thoughts that swirl in his mind. The room is dark, lit only by the flickering light of the screen, and the shadows seem to pulse, with a life of their own. Suddenly, the screen goes black, and for a moment, there's nothing but darkness. Then, slowly, the figure from the bridge appears on the screen, its void-like face staring directly at Mark, its presence filling the room with a cold, suffocating dread. Mark feels the pull of the darkness stronger than ever, a deep, irresistible urge to give in, to let go. The figure on the screen reaches out, its shadowy hand stretching toward him, and Mark knows that if he touches it, he will be lost forever. But he can't move, can't look away. The darkness has him now, its grip tightening around his mind, pulling him deeper into the void. In a final act of desperation, Mark smashes the television, shattering the screen into 1,000 pieces. The figure vanishes, the darkness retreating for now, but Mark knows that it's not over. The bridge may be gone, but its darkness lives on inside him, a curse that he will carry for the rest of his life. He is no longer the man he once was. He is something else, something darker, something that has been touched by the void. As he sits in the darkness of his shattered apartment, Mark realizes that the bridge has won. It has taken something from him, something vital, and left him with a void that can never be filled. The man he once was is gone, replaced by something hollow, something lost. The bridge has left its mark, a scar that will never heal, and Mark knows that he will never truly be free. In the final moments of the story, Mark stands at his window, looking out at the city below. The lights twinkle in the darkness, but they seem distant, cold. He can feel the pull of the bridge, the darkness that waits for him, and he knows that one day he will return. One day, he will give in, and the void will claim him as it has claimed so many others. The story ends with Mark staring into the night, his reflection in the window distorted, the void staring back at him, waiting.